A Benny Goodman band member once said, "I knew when Benny entered the room because I heard the sound of 13 pairs of butt cheeks clenching. I could feel the whole band tense up. He had a real presence to him. I've met very few people that have had that kind of magnetism. Frank Sinatra had it. Maybe Ella Fitzgerald. But very few." The late Benny Goodman is almost universally recognized as not only one of the greatest jazz clarinetists of the 20th century, but possibly the best. Although Benny Goodman, also known as the King of Swing, was unquestionably one of the greatest musicians of the swing era, his development in other areas, particularly interpersonal relations, was sometimes seemingly far less advanced. Benny Goodman has been called many things. Egocentric, self-absorbed, insensitive, and arrogant are words that have frequently been used to describe his behavior. Benny's behavior was sometimes irritating, often insensitive, and almost always oblivious to the feelings of others. But he was such a superb musician that these faults would be tolerated. Benny Goodman was notoriously bad about remembering people's names. Whenever he couldn't remember someone's name, he would invariably call that person Pops, no matter if it was a man or a woman. Benny wasn't really a bad person, certainly not as antisocial as his chief rival, Artie Shaw, but he tended to be aloof and self-centered to the point where he was often in a fog, and highly critical of any musician who didn't meet his high standards. There are more stories among jazz musicians about Goodman than any other performer, living or dead. If a member of his band didn't play up to snuff, he would often stare at them consistently until they noticed, at which point they would become even more nervous and play even worse. Musicians called this stare the ray. Benny was also tight-fisted with salaries to musicians in his band, though not nearly as tight as Lionel Hampton. Several prominent singers who worked with Benny Goodman disliked his behavior, especially the cold and emotionally distant way he treated them. His obsession with the music often meant he was oblivious to the feelings of the band members, and vocalists often bore the brunt of this indifference. Helen Forrest, who sang with Goodman's orchestra from 1939 to 1941, was one of his most vocal critics. She publicly called Goodman the rudest man she ever met. Peggy Lee, who replaced Helen Forrest in 1941, had a slightly more complex relationship with Goodman, though he helped launch her career, and they produced a national hit with "Why Don't You Do Right?" Lee initially found his preoccupied demeanor and constant staring unpleasant. She believed he didn't like her at first, not realizing it was just his preoccupied way of looking at musicians. His absent-mindedness was legendary. One snowy January night, he left the theater after a concert and passed a convertible with the top left down. "Look at what this jerk did," said Benny. "He forgot to put the top up, and now his car is filled with snow." 10 seconds later, he realized it was his car. It could have been a far different life had destiny not intervened. Benjamin David Goodman was born on May 30th, 1909 in Chicago, Illinois. He was the 9th child of immigrants David Goodman and Dora Goodman, who left Russia to escape anti-Semitism. Benny's mother never learned to speak English. His father worked for a tailor to support his large family, which eventually grew to include a total of 12 children, and had trouble making ends meet. Struggling to raise a family of 12 on sweatshop wages, Benny Goodman's father believed music might be a ticket out of poverty for his eldest sons. He enrolled them in free music classes at a local synagogue when Benny was just 10. His older brothers were given a tuba and a trombone, but Benny, the smallest, got a clarinet. From the outset, he was a prodigy of unmistakable talent. As a youth, he had frequented the jazz halls on the south side of Chicago, soaking in some of the greatest music in the world. By the time he was 15, Goodman had dropped out of school and established himself as a professional musician. It was then that the Ben Pollock Orchestra asked him to move to California and join the band. In 1933, Benny began to work with John Hammond, a jazz promoter who would later help to launch the recording careers of Billie Holiday and Count Basie. Hammond wanted Benny to record with drummer Gene Krupa and trombonist Jack T. Garden. The result of this recording session was the onset of Benny's national popularity. Later, Benny would marry Alice Hammond Duckworth, John Hammond's sister, and have 2 daughters. Benny led his first band in 1934 and began a stint at Billy Rose's Music Hall, playing Fletcher Henderson's arrangements. The music they played had its roots in the southern jazz forms of ragtime and Dixieland. This gave it an accessibility that appealed to American audiences on a wide scale. In 1934, he got his first big break. Goodman found a spot headlining on a new NBC radio program called Let's Dance. These regular performances created a nationwide audience for his big band sound. And it was this audience that would eventually go wild for the Benny Goodman Band in live performances at the Palomar Ballroom in Los Angeles, the Congress Hotel in Chicago, and the Paramount Theater in New York. Clearly a musician and band leader on the rise, Goodman had his first #1 hit with the instrumental piece, Moonglow. He also released one of his trademark songs, Sing, 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 that same year, which was later inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. This new swing music had young people dancing with excitement when on August 21st, 1935, Benny Goodman's band performed at the Palomar Ballroom in Los Angeles. The concert was a sensation, signaling the start of Benny's reign as the king of swing and the dawn of the swing era. Teenagers and college students across the nation created energetic new dance steps to match the thrilling rhythms of the music. Benny's band, and many others that followed, quickly became popular with audiences from all walks of life. His passion was music, and his big band sound quickened the pulse of a generation ready to shrug off the depression and dance. With clarinet in hand, Benny Goodman was transformed from a child in Chicago's impoverished Jewish ghetto into the king of swing, greeted with near pandemonium wherever his band played. During this period, Benny also became famous for being colorblind when it came to racial segregation and prejudice. Pianist Teddy Wilson, an African-American, first appeared in the Benny Goodman Trio at the Congress Hotel in 1935. Benny added Lionel Hampton, who would later form his own band. Although his band was not the first to feature both white and black musicians, Benny's national popularity helped to make racially mixed groups more accepted in the mainstream. Benny once said, "If a guy's got it, let him give it." He also made history by being the first jazz band to perform at the prestigious Carnegie Hall in 1938, which helped legitimize jazz as an art form. By the 1940s, the sound of swing, which had been an all-pervasive part of American culture, began to fade as many musicians began experimenting with new jazz forms. With the rise in popularity of bebop came the virtual end of the big band era and swing. Though the big band days were drawing to a close and new forms of music were emerging, Benny continued to play music in the swing style. Goodman eventually broke up his big band and performed with small groups over the years. He also later recorded the soundtrack for the film about his life, The Benny Goodman Story, in 1955, which starred comedian Steve Allen as Goodman. In his later years, Goodman played classical music with greater frequency. In the late 1940s, Goodman also commissioned works from Aaron Copland and Paul Hindemith, and he performed works of Igor Stravinsky, Leonard Bernstein, and Morton Gould. Goodman was a respected classical player, noted for combining the emotional expressiveness of jazz with a precise classical technique. He served as jazz ambassador for the United States, with tours of South America and Japan. And in 1962, he was the first American jazz artist to perform in the Soviet Union. Despite health problems, he continued to perform, his last concert being 6 days before his death, on June 13, 1986. This is David from One Track Jazz. Thanks for spending time with us on this journey through jazz history. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about the legends behind the music, be sure to join our community and become part of our jazz family.